Greetings and salutations, good friends. Welcome to the very first episode of, I don't know what this is, but we're going to call it something at some point. Right now, what we're going to be discussing, I've got a beautiful panel. Look at that beautiful panel down below. We're going to be talking about LGBTQIA plus issues, hate crimes, that kind of stuff, how it pertains to us in the LGBTQIA plus community. If you're an ally, take a listen. You might learn some fun stuff. Let me introduce the panel. For me, I'm Julie. I'm the Cap. What's up? Nerd Girl 22. As you can see, awesome sauce. We've got, and I will pull them up as we go. This is Shiva. Hello, Shiva.
Hello.
We've got Reese, effing Space Cadet. We've got Andrea, our Gamora.
Hi.
Mama Bear, who is my mama.
Pleased to meet you all.
And my best friend, Devin. Or Bougie, as we like to call him. F you, Bougie. So, we're going to talk about so many cool things tonight. Sit back, relax, and have some fun. Everybody ready?
Let's go.
All right, let's do this. And here we are. Look at all of us. Oh my God, it's like the Brady Bunch. I love it.
Brady Bunch.
Hollywood Squares.
Hollywood Squares. Oh, Hollywood Squares. I want to be in Hollywood Squares. So one of the things that the reason why we started to do this is because of Jason Fox. As I don't know if people know about the Jason Fox story, but this is a young man who was brutally murdered for being gay. And people can try to spin it any which way they want. He was murdered because he's gay. So one of the things that I want to do is put together a panel to talk about these issues, why these things are happening to marginalized communities, not just necessarily LGBTQIA plus communities, right? So for myself, I've already asked everybody if they're cool and comfortable with me telling you this, but we're going to reveal ours, which is why we think we can talk about this. I personally am an out lesbian. My mother is obviously my mom. She is non-LGBTQIA plus, but she's an ally. Andrea is bisexual. Reese is transitioning to male. Shiva is transitioning to female. Devin is not quite fully out, but out to his friends and not all of his family yet. So this topic hits home for us. We want to talk about how it affects us, how we move forward, the legislation that has been passed in the past, the hate crimes legislation, the Matthew Shepard Act. Are they working? It doesn't seem like they are for certain people. For certain marginalized communities, they are working. For certain marginalized communities, they're not working. Right? So let's talk about it. Let's get into it. Let's discuss what's going on and how we get to where we need to get to. Right? So first, I want to ask, everybody on the panel, and I'm going to go around in how I see you on my screen, your experience either being in the community or an ally, obviously, because mom is an ally to the community. So what I want to do is actually want to start with Reese. I'm going to go counterclockwise. So Reese, why don't you talk about, your experience?
My experience. Well, I knew at a very young age that I was not female. The thing was, in 1979, trans was not something that people knew about. That wasn't something that was discussed. And for the longest time, my conversations with my parents about my wanting to have male genitalia were stories retold as jokes. And people would laugh. It was funny, out of the mouths of babes, that type of thing. But it was something that made sense in my head, and it was something I knew in my head. When I would, because we all play these games in our when we're kids, when we role play certain things. Like I'm a cowboy, or I'm a superhero, or things like that. All my characters were men. I remember one of my favorite shows when I was a kid being old episodes of Wild Wild West. One of my earliest role models was Robert Conrad. I didn't objectify him. I wanted to be him. I thought he was the most amazing person on the planet. To a little 4 or 5-year-old me, he was the epitome of what I wanted to be. But again, these things weren't known. These things weren't talked about back then. I didn't know what trans was. I didn't really know what trans was until I was in my 30s.
Wow.
All I knew was my mother wanted me to dress a certain way while I was a kid, and I didn't want to dress that way because it just didn't fit me. Dresses, doing my hair, wearing makeup, that was not me. And it was never me. I was the sports-minded kid. I played sports when I was young. Loved to watch sports. Still love to watch sports. And I am more comfortable watching sports with the guys.
One of the biggest dynamic wrinkles for you, Reese, is, you were in the military.
Yeah.
So that creates an even bigger part of the wrinkle, because up until only maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I could be wrong on that, they didn't really recognize, the non-associated gender. Right? The military has taken a very long time to catch up when it comes to certain issues. So that's another wrinkle that gets thrown in there for you. So not only did growing up in the 80s and the early 90s not help you, growing up and then going into the military did not help either.
No.
Yeah.
No. There was a certain look that I had to adhere to when I was in the military, and I did not adhere to that look.
Right.
I struggled with that as well.
I mean, did that compound how you felt emotionally about yourself, because you were like literally being forced to present a certain way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It absolutely did. And I mean, only recently has the VA started to recognize trans persons And I mean, my VA card still has my dead name on it. So, I haven't been able to start the process of having the VA recognize me yet.
And I can assume that that's a probably long and arduous task.
Yeah,
Yeah, big time.
it is.
Big time. All right. Thank you, Reese. Let's head over to Shiva. Now, Shiva, I know your story is a little bit more intense. I only want you to share what you're comfortable sharing, just for your own mental health sake. Okay.
All right. I came out 15, about the same time I went through conversion therapy, had to deal with all that family trauma, and it's very convoluted. So I'm going to skip ahead a bit. I came out as trans 3.5 years ago. I was not prepared for any uh, legal aspects or having to fight with the medical industry to get any kind of access to care. That's where I'm at now, and it's one of those things that it messes with you mentally, it messes with your emotions, it changes your perspective of everything. Sorry, I'm
Nope. Take your time.
trying to process my thoughts there.
Take your time.
um, and having to look back at the fact that I went through conversion therapy in the mid '90s, and this is up in Wisconsin, and their version of conversion therapy is basically torture. Strap knee to tables and strapping electrodes to places that I'm not going to mention, and trying to basically electrocute you until you have nothing left. Coming from that to where I'm at today, it's still a lot of trauma and mental anguish that I have to endure still.
And has going through the process of realizing that you are who you truly are now helped in somewhat of the healing process for you, or is it still really, really difficult?
It's mildly difficult, but
Okay.
it's something that I'm still working through.
But you truly feel now that you are the person you were always meant to be.
Oh yes,
And that's all that matters right there.
yeah.
Right there.
Yes, ma'am.
So we've got people shifted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bounce up to Andrea, because Andrea's story's a little fun too. Andrea you are bisexual.
Correct.
You are currently in a relationship with a woman who
Yes.
is thebomb.com. Shout out to her.
Fact.
So why don't you talk about your history or how it affects you, and we'll go from there.
So I think in my teens, middle school, high school age, I always thought girls were really pretty and kind of felt, I guess, looking back on it like an attraction. Yes, you're so pretty. And, but I never, because I still like boys too, and I didn't know that bisexual was a thing. And I went off to college and made some friends in the gay community, which I think saved my life at the end of the day. And I kind of discovered it. But we're talking 1991, 1992, when you really couldn't walk around holding hands or kissing your significant other, in public. And so it was different, and it always felt a little shameful. And I come from a Southern Baptist religion where, hellfire and brimstone on my head, kind of raising. And then I ended up pregnant. And life took me in a different direction. And I primarily dated men, got married twice. And not that I went back in the closet. I just really thought that part of my life was over. Not that it was an experimental thing, that it was just something, just my life went in a different pattern. And it's always been in the back of my mind. However, since meeting you and a bunch of our wonderful friends, I really started taking a look at who I was. It just made me really realize when I would see a video, like a LGBTQ pride video, it would pull at me. And so, I had a conversation with you. I remember that conversation. And for the first time in my life, I feel comfortable. I'm out at work. I'm not out to some of my family, but we don't talk that much. So, like, even my sisters, we don't talk that much. My sister that I was raised with, she knows. She's like, oh, okay, whatever. But it's different being out in 2021 than 1991. It's a big difference.
Yes, it most certainly is. And for those of you, you can get more of Andrea because Andrea is going to be hosting her very own show called Back Sandwich. We're very excited about that at the Total Nerd Takeover. This is like our first thing, so this is really cool. The next person I want to talk to is Devin, who is bougie, who's my best friend. His story is a little bit different. He's still somewhat in the closet, but it's to hear his perspective is going to be, I think, very interesting. So Devin, why don't you go ahead and give us a little background?
Okay. So I've only been out for a good 2-3 years now, so this is still all kind of new to me. Julie knows this. I had this conversation with her. Not fully out to, I would say, any family member at all. Just not comfortable doing that yet. But at some point I would like to get there. But I always knew that there was something different about me compared to other people. Kind of just sitting in a group of just all guys, I always felt, I guess I would consider more feminine or more girly than other people. I always liked the sparkly things or all the fabulous things. Was never really into sports. I would always play with girls at recess when I was younger. That was more, I fit in a lot better and was a lot more comfortable with females. Just being around other males made me uncomfortable. Like, was it noticeable? Julie knows it's very noticeable, but it's still a process. I don't really have a lot to my story as much as others because I would say I'm still on that journey, which I don't think is ever really going to end, but it's still fresh for me, and it's still it's hard to talk about because I want to tell family members, but I don't know how. So it's still fresh for me, but.
And you're always going to be on that journey. It's always going to be a process and a journey. It never ends. It truly doesn't end. So before we get to my mom, I'll give you my journey so that my mom can give her perspective. I didn't come out until I was 23 years old. I was in a relationship with a woman who was married. In fact, I was in 2 of those relationships, both extremely toxic in so many different retrospects. But I had a lot of trouble growing up and struggling about who I was. Like, I liked boys. I thought boys were cool, but I didn't want to sleep with boys. I didn't want to do that kind of stuff with boys. And I liked girls, but I didn't know if I liked girls or if I was just one of those people that just floats in the atmosphere, right? Until I met my ex, then I realized, okay, this is exactly who I am. And it was a freeing feeling for me, extremely freeing. Turns out that I spent 10 years in a relationship that gave me nothing in return for what I gave to it. And that was a process that I had to understand and come to terms with on my own. It wasn't easy, but like everybody's story, the journey is never easy. It's very difficult. I wasn't afraid to tell my mom. I wasn't. I was more afraid to tell my father. And my father had snide comments to say. I should have been dropped more. My mom should have beat me more. I should have had holy water sprayed on me. He thought he was being funny, but I knew at the end of the day, it's what he truly meant. And I had a lot of disassociation with my dad because, he wanted a particular person to be a daughter. He wanted the long hair, that cared about makeup, the pretty, and, funny thing is he got that. And then that person got knocked up when they weren't married. So, be careful what you wish for, because it's not always the best thing. That hurt, because I used to have somewhat of a good relationship with my dad, better than my brother, unfortunately. And I just didn't want any parts of him in my life. And I was so grateful for my mom. She wasn't happy about it at first. She thought it was a phase I was going through. And little by little, I let her come to terms with it on her own time, let her ask questions and such. And now she is like my biggest champion. And everybody on this panel, she'll be their biggest champion too. She always is. She's mom to everybody. She's Mama Bear. And she's very excited for my future with my my fiance, who is truly the person that I think I was looking for all along. And I met her on TikTok. As I met almost, with the exception of obviously my mom and Devin and Shiva, Andrea and Reese and we met on TikTok. So we are TikTok buddies, and they've been on this journey with me, and I'm so grateful for them. But like I want to tell Devin, it's a constant journey. It never ends. It never ends. All right. Since Mama Bear is the ally in the room, give your take on how it felt when I came out, and be honest. Don't be afraid to say what how you felt and how you feel now with the education that you were given through the process.
Okay, not a problem. Hello, all. I just want to say that everyone here is a beautiful person, inside and out. And that's how I feel about that. But we can get into that later. I had a very good childhood, and I was raised by good parents. I was adopted, but that's another topic. And my father and I he taught me to love everyone for who they are, no matter what. And that's where I got the saying, never judge a book by its cover. Because if you do judge someone without knowing the inside, their heart, what they're good at, you're going to miss out on a lot of stuff. And this is what I tried to instill in Julie and her brother. I had a very painful relationship. I was married for 14 years. He was very abusive, mentally and physically. And when Julie was growing up, I noticed that she didn't really like dresses, and I didn't push it. And, she didn't, she was sports oriented, which was great with my father. She fit right in for that. And I just noticed that she just had more masculine type features. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, she wasn't a man, but she was more boyish, if I can say that. And I didn't really think anything of it because I was with my brother and all his friends all the time. We played touch football, so I didn't think anything of it. But as she matured throughout the years, I kind of got a little suspicious, and I put it in the back of my mind because I didn't want to face it. And breaking away from my ex, being on my own, I fell into the church. And a good friend of mine, Hope, who I love dearly, she got me to go to church. Okay. So then I had the church, sort of that aspect of, gay is against the will of God and all this other stuff. And I read the Bible, I still do every Sunday, and I thought, well, you know, maybe this isn't what God has intended. And the more Julie, was out there and whatnot, I kind of knew. And then in the back of my mind, it started to come a little bit more to the forefront. And I learned about the boy who was murdered because he was gay. They put him on the fence. They threw bottles at his head.
Matthew Shepard.
Matthew Shepard, thank you.
Yep.
And that bothered me more than anything in the world. I just couldn't. I just said to myself, if this is the way Julie wants to be, then she should be who she is. And it's not up to me to tell her not to. And I don't want her ending up like that. No mother should ever want that for their child. So she came to me, and when she sat down and talked to me, I just knew what she was going to say before she said it. And I said to her, honestly, I said, Julie, I love you. You're my daughter. I love you no matter what. I love you no matter who you are. I have to process it. And I was honest with her. I had to process it because it was in the back of my head. I've been through an abusive husband who was, he would be every gay slur there was. Okay. And, here's my daughter telling me what I already knew. I need time to process it. So I thought about it and I thought about it. And I went to her and I said, I'd rather have, like I said in my TikTok video, which is true from my heart, that I'd rather have 38 years of her than not have her at all, So, sorry. So that's where I am. And she put me to a lot of good people. And I don't judge a book by its cover. I will never judge a book by its cover. I always want to get to the true people because your heart and what you bring to others is so important and it should not be stifled. And no mother should ever lose a child because they are gay or black or anything. It's wrong. We're humans and we should be treating others like human beings, not by their color of their skin or anything that they have. And I admire Reese to the bitter end, and I admire Shivi. That takes a lot of hard work and soul searching, and they are beautiful people and should be treated as such. And that's my thing.
Absolutely. So, Mom, one of the things that, and we're going to now start to get into this, deep dive into a lot of statistics. Andrea is our statistician. One of the most important statistics that people don't talk about enough, I feel they don't talk about enough. You get a lot of it talked about on the Human Rights Campaign, the Trevor Project and whatnot, is the rate of suicide among the LGBTQIA plus teenagers. They come out and their parents disown them. Their parents don't want them anywhere near them. And they kick them out of the house and they're basically on their own and they have nowhere to go. And the constant bullying and the bullying, not even in their schools, the bullying in their own families.
Social media.
Right. Social media, that kind of stuff. As a mother, to a lesbian daughter, how does that make you feel? Even at the height of when you were thinking, your thinking process was, the Bible says, no, but once you started to read it for yourself and were kind of taken out of that spell of what, a specific group wants you to think, how do you as a parent, like, you never were going to kick me out. Like you were very clear about that. Like you're my kid regardless. But for these parents that have such a difficult, narrow-minded approach, like to turn their child away that you gave life to, that you fed, that you clothed, that you sheltered, that you tried to cultivate. How do you just turn them out like that? how does that, as an ally, as a PFLAG mom, how does that make you feel?
Very, I guess the word is surprised, but not surprised. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, I can only tell by my experience. When I carried you for 9 months, you were born feet first. And I loved being pregnant. I knew I was giving a life. Okay. I was that. It's a blessing of God that we can have children. Okay. And that was one of my thought processes. Like, you go and carry this child for 9 months, you're feeding this child, and the child is a baby, and you're loving this baby. And all of a sudden they grow up and they tell you that they're gay or whatever. How can you just like turn it off like a faucet? I'm sorry, I don't get it. I don't understand that. I just don't. I don't know. Different people they feel differently, and I don't know, but I can't fathom it. I just can't fathom it. And I worry about children that are going through this. I worry about them because there's a lot of evil people out there.
Right.
You know,
Andrea, you have another unique perspective on this topic as well, because not only are you a member of the LGBTQIA plus community, your son is also a member of the LGBTQIA plus community, who is now non-binary. Am I correct?
Correct.
So my apologies for saying the S word. I apologize on that one. But your child now is of our community. So you have two unique perspectives here. You're a member of it, and you're a parent of somebody who is in the community.
So I think for me, I'm a different kind of mom anyway. You know, I've always talked to him like a grown up. But Brendan is a very complex young man. He's 22. He's got a lot of medical conditions. He's on the autism spectrum. So he's complex. But I'm grateful for the friends that I first made in college that kind of brought me into the community. And I've had friends whose family threw them out and, you know, disowned them and put them on the streets and ended up on drugs and, you know, and all kind of horrible things. And I always said, if I have a child, never. I don't care who he is, who he loves, whatever. He's my kid at the end of the day. So I'll share this story. Brendan came out to me at Walmart. Yeah. And I just went, okay, but we had to do this in the middle of Walmart. And he was like, because you would have made a big deal about it at home. And I knew you wouldn't say anything. Because we're in
It would have been a better
Walmart.
story if it was the Piggly Wiggly.
Right. It totally would have been better if we were on the ham hock aisle at the Piggly Wiggly. But and his journey is different because he's non-binary and is gay, and it was a process. First he was bisexual, then it was gay, then he had his first sexual experience with a woman and he was like, no, I'm gay. And he's talked to me several times about possibly being transgender. And through people that I've met on TikTok, I understood the non-binary world. There's been some amazing creators who have taught me a lot. And I was able to help her with that. And it's special, you know, but I worry as a mom because being non-binary is part of the trans community, and being autistic sometimes puts him at a disadvantage socially. It's scary. You know, the idea of him going off in the world. Shit, she. Sorry, the pronouns are new in our house, but it's hard as a parent because that's my worry.
Right. Yeah, I think for a lot of parents, I mean, I don't know yet. I'm not a parent. I'm going to be. But
Yay.
I'm of the mindset, not like tomorrow or anything like that. Like,
triplets.
no, don't breathe oxygen into that. Damn it. But like in the long term, you know, I guess maybe it's because I grew up with the mom that I grew up with, and I have both perspectives. A father that was not very present, and a mother who gave a damn. And I think for me, if it's my child, male, female, or, you know, non-binary, I want them to be whatever the hell they want to be, period. You know, if I have a son and my son wants to dress like a princess, then fucking dress like a princess. If I have a daughter that wants to dress like, you know, a superhero that's a man, then do it. I don't care. Whatever you want to do, whatever sets your creativity aflame, or whatever gives you that like feel of this is me, fucking do it. I don't understand. And I guess maybe it's because it's the extremist in the I mean, let's be 100. It's the extremist Christianity, right? How can you sit there and claim to be preachers of the word of the Bible, but yet don't follow any of the teachings of Jesus Christ, right? Like, I don't understand that. It's very simple, right? Love your neighbor, period, right? Judge not, lest ye be judged. Everything else is all background noise when it comes to the Bible. It's a story that is being told. But those two things are very important, right? You can't judge anybody else. You have to love your neighbor, even if you don't like your neighbor, right? But you have to respect each other. We have so many problems going on right now when it comes to POC issues, indigenous things, you know, LGBTQI, all these marginalized communities, because nobody wants to shut up and listen to each other, right? Like, we're coming up on the anniversary of 9/11. 20 years. In 20 years, we haven't learned a damn thing.
Nope.
Period.
No.
Right? For me, I've like always been one of those people. I want to know about all faiths, all religions, because I feel like it gives you not only better knowledge, but you can understand other perspectives. But for me, it's like, okay, if you look at the Muslim, like the religion, it's a beautiful religion. It's a beautiful religion. But then you have extremists who take it to the next step. Christianity on its surface is not bad. You get the extremists, and now you've got what we have in the United States, where we have people wanting to take horse tranquilizers because they don't want to get a vaccine, because this is the smarter option than just putting a needle in your arm for a half a second and, you know, saving other people's lives.
Right.
But at the end of the day, right, everybody deserves to be heard. We just don't have to listen to you, right? So you can stand out there with your Bibles and your signs that God hates you know what's. You can say all you want. You have the right to say it. Doesn't mean I have to listen to it. But the funny thing is, and I want to know if everybody else on the panel feels this way, those people hate us. We don't hate them.
No, not at all.
We don't hate them.
No.
And that's what, you know, always throws me for a loop. Like, and then again, how does what I do in the privacy of my home, in my bedroom, affect you in any way, shape, or form?
Exactly.
Right? Now, I get it. If I was, you know, doing the nasty on the front lawn and everybody could see it, okay, then you have an argument. Sure.
I'm
But,
selling tickets, by the way.
I mean, you
I'd be
can.
after
You
For
can if you
99.
want to.
So, can I add this? So,
Go
I
for it.
think it's a good segue to talk about suicide in the LGBTQ community. Now, in general, it's not very known the exact statistics of LGBTQ related suicides, basically without a letter, right? Without some kind of note, because it's not on their birth certificate, right? You can't put, sexual identity and gender on a birth certificate. Um, and it's not in any of the death records. So, um, where's the percentage? 40% of transgendered adults have attempted suicide. 40%. So out of 100 transgender people in the US, 40% of them have attempted suicide. That's harsh. But I think, and then when you start looking at a lot of youth suicide rates, it's even worse. And I'm going to specifically call out the South because it is the Bible Belt of the country. When you start bringing religion into it, children are raised that it's one man, one woman, the whole 9 yards. And they're like, no. Bobby goes, no, I like Jimmy, not Susie. And it is the brainwashing and it creates an internalization and then depression and
Yeah.
and then the suicide in children come even higher.
Yeah.
They're saying that in 2015 it was 4.5 times as many LGBT identified high school students than non. 6.4% of suicides were non LGBTQ community members, and 29.4 were.
It's a staggering number.
And that was in 2015.
It's a
While
staggering number.
being part of the community for as long as I have been, even though I was, on a different path for a little bit of my life, I've always still had friends. And things have changed for the better in a lot of ways, but it's not because our youth are killing themselves.
Yeah. I mean, let's go back to the 70s, right? If people think that gay or lesbian or all of these issues are a modern thing, you have not been paying attention, right? This goes back to the dawn of man. I don't care what anybody tells you, it does. But let's talk about the 70s. Gay pride does not exist today if a riot didn't happen, right? And that riot was started by a trans woman of color.
facts.
Right? Two of
Two
them.
trans.
Right.
Marsha P. Jackson.
Marsha P. Jackson. God bless her. And we are where we are today because of it. Because of that singular moment in where we are. It starts the ball rolling in, LGBTQIA plus legislation and that kind of stuff. Let's go into the 80s. What happened in the 80s? A massive epidemic, right? A massive epidemic that was disproportionately affecting gay men and gay men of color. That nobody ever wants to talk about that statistic, not ever, because at that time in the 80s, you didn't talk about it. Well, it didn't help that you had hierarchies in the political spectrum, i.e. the president of the United States, who failed to say the word AIDS. You have a staggering amount of your citizens dying from this epidemic, and you can't even bring yourself to say the word. That's a big issue, right? And that was a massive, and it went into the early 90s, right? Then you got a president who gave a damn, brought awareness to it, put it at the forefront of his legislation and what he wants to do. And even after he left office, put it at the forefront of his life's goals, getting AIDS medications to Africa at a much reduced rate that was now saving African communities, right? Then you had, obviously it wasn't all good in that administration. Don't Ask, Don't Tell was extremely detrimental. At the time, not so bad. As it started to progress and go forward, it became really bad. We've always had to overcome a hurdle, right, in the LGBTQIA plus community, but we've never done it by ourselves. We've always done it together as a group, as a community. When one thing happens to this community, we rally around every person of the community and push the ball forward. We keep fighting. We never stop. We never sleep, because the fight never stops, right? It never ends. And then in the late 90s, we had one of the worst hate crimes to ever happen to a member of our community. Matthew Shepard's story was something that, for me, once I saw it, and I think I was 16 at the time, that touched me in a really deep, profound way. What they did to this young man because of one thing that didn't define him at all. I used to tell people, and I don't know if you guys feel the same way, being gay doesn't define me. It's a piece of my journey. It's one wrinkle in my chain, or one link in the connection of, for me to life. That's it. It's not all that I am. It's not all that I'm ever going to be. So to be murdered because of this much of yourself in the brutal way in which it happened, it hits you at your core, right? And how long did it take, Matthew Shepard's parents to push that legislation, to get it through? The Matthew Shepard, it's the Matthew Shepard Act, correct?
Yes.
Took forever.
2009.
Took forever. This shouldn't have been a thing, right? The hate crime legislation in the country needs an update in a dramatic way, because now we're dealing with this situation that happened with Jason Fox. And this is kind of how it all ties back together for us, right? The brutal way Jason Fox was murdered, that nobody wants to talk about, MSNBC, CNN. If you guys want to call me, drop me a link, because this story needs to be told. It needs to be told. We had no problem telling Matthew's story, the Laramie Project, all that stuff. So why is this different? Why is this story different? Is it because of the political climate we just came out of?
Exactly.
Right. So let's discuss
Strong
this.
possibility.
Right. Let's talk about, Andrea, I know you have it up. Do you want to read what the federal hate crimes legislation is at the moment? Or maybe you didn't have it up? Maybe
Yeah,
I
I
went.
did. I just had
Okay.
to scroll up.
All right. Cool.
When it applies to LGBTQ in the Matthew Shepard Act, it criminalizes willfully causing bodily injury or attempting to do so with fire, firearm, or other dangerous weapon. Now, here are the requirements. The crime was committed because the actual or perceived race, color, religion, national origin of any person, or the crime was committed because of the actual or perceived religion, national origin, gender, gender identity, or disability of any person, and the crime affected interstate or foreign commerce, or occurred within federal, special maritime, and territorial jurisdictions. That's verbatim. It does not account for threats, but Like if somebody says, I'm going to kill you, you're slur, slur, slur. Um, it's not a hate crime. And that might be the key problem.
Yeah.
We have come out of a political climate where it was okay to express your biases and hate and beliefs and act on them accordingly. And
With
until
no
people,
repercussion.
none,
Yeah.
none. I mean, in my opinion, the people who rioted on the Capitol are getting slaps on the wrist, most of them.
Yeah.
And that's my opinion. Um, but I think until we start slapping a lot of people on their wrist for saying things so out of line, if they know they're going to get in trouble for saying it, they're going to be scared to actually do it. That's what I would hope would happen.
But see, here's and then we run into a situation at that is because now you are policing people's beliefs, right? That's the argument that you'll get. Well, you're policing my beliefs, right? But you have no problem policing my vagina. Just saying. But like there's that part, right? But at the end of the day, every prosecutor needs to prove intent, right? There always has to be intent. The reason why the Matthew Shepard case got where it went to with these three, I believe it was three individuals, two male and the female that lured, right? Because you proved intent. You have to prove intent, right? As in the case of Jason Fox, you have intent. There's got plenty of evidence of intent, but you have a small town controlled by a couple families. Nobody wants to do anything, right? But the issue is still the same. A brutal murder happened to a young man that had his life ahead of him, right? So making it a federal hate crime, which I don't know why the FBI doesn't want to touch it, adds 25 to life for each individual. And I spoke with Pepper Fox, who is Jason's mother, and there are, as of right now, identified 19 people involved in the brutal murder of Jason Fox. Whether you were conspiring to or whatever, I think all should be charged the same.
Yep.
I agree with that.
Right. Period. Now, as it pertains to the actual, so that was the Matthew Shepard Act, right? So it was a piggyback onto the federal hate crime mandate, but the federal hate crime mandate isn't nearly enough. We see that on a day in and day out basis when we're talking about, POC, right? When, it's clear cut that these people were taken from this earth because of the color of their skin or of a certain other reason of marginalized community, right? So where do we go? How do we get to where we need to get to so that everybody can walk this world, this country, let's be 100 about it.
Facts.
That can walk this country freely to be who they are, when they want to be, how they want to be it, without worrying about looking over their shoulder. I don't know about any of the other people on the panel. I've had to many, many times, being in specific areas, look over my shoulder.
I do every day.
When I
had to move to a completely different state.
Right. But you are a much better person now that you've gone there. You've just, your whole light has been changed,
I can say this coming from Louisiana, not being from New Orleans, but going to New Orleans. Going to New Orleans in the 90s, you had to really worry about the extreme religious people who walked down Canal Street in New Orleans with a cross on wheels and everything going, you need to read the Bible, you're going to where, and And now you still see that. But even in a place like New Orleans, whose, decadence is, worldwide, it is slowly different, but it's still there. And, I heard on the radio they were talking in reference to like the abortion stuff going on all over the country, that they tied in the Equality Act. And it's not enough either. It's not.
Right. Shiva, did you want to say something?
I mean, here in Tennessee, since I moved here from San Diego, and moving from there to here, it not only is it a culture shock with the amount of religious everything, it's it's not quite exactly what I expected. Having to look over my shoulder, having to worry about someone trying to shoot me for being trans, or trying to get with somebody. It's vastly different everywhere across the country. I don't know how it is in New Mexico or Pennsylvania, but
And see, in my experience in Middle Tennessee versus Chivy's experience in East Tennessee is completely different because I'm
Right.
close to Nashville, but there's still issues here.
I mean, I think it's the same scenario we have here in Pennsylvania. We're on the eastern side of PA, which is a lot more progressive. There are certain areas within that are still conservative, but for the most part, it's a progressive, liberalish area. You know, Western Pennsylvania around Pittsburgh, you're gonna get that also that liberal feel, but in the middle, it's very conservative, like extremely conservative. Um, so it's not all that great if you're in the middle, but if you're in the very populated areas and the very expensive areas, it's a lot different experience. Now, Reese was just in Missouri, which was not very progressive or very welcoming at all, and moved to New Mexico, which is a lot better for him in general. And we can see a vast difference. We talk with Reese every single day. We can see a huge difference in Reese every day, and it's a great thing to see in our brother. Everybody on this panel, with the exception of my mom, is my brother or my sister. So it's great to have that. But for those people that are in the middle of nowhere, Utah, which we know how Utah is, or Mississippi, hell, even parts of Georgia, it's not safe. It's not
Not-
safe to be in any marginalized community, let alone LGBTQIA plus, right?
So
So go ahead.
let me add some statistics about violent crime for our community. LGBT people 16 years and older are 4 times more likely to experience violent victimization compared to non-community members. And they are 6 times more likely to experience at the hand of someone they know.
Right. Right.
Most are not reported to the police, and it's just another example of where police action needs, it needs a presence. Like, people need to feel like they can trust the police to report a crime, regardless of what you look like or who you are.
Right. And you can't even feel that anymore. Devin, for you being the youngest on the panel, for you coming to age in a different time than the rest of us did, do you feel scared in the current climate that we're in, or did you?
So I'll definitely say when I was younger, in the mid to late 90s, when I was growing up, it was definitely very, very taboo. A lot of people who were, in the community were considered, I don't know what the correct word would be, they were definitely, I guess the word would be, picked on or pointed out more. In the 90s, at least I've noticed. I'd say now it's still an issue, but not as big of an issue. At least, I've lived in the same area my whole entire life, and it's been definitely more progressive as it's gone on. But even with that being said, I still have times when, when I come to visit you or going to some of those towns, it gets very, very uncomfortable, because you can see their mindset because they aren't shy about putting out, how they feel about, other communities, that are different than them. Um, it's probably not as much fear as you guys might have seen, in the 80s or earlier, but it's still there. Going out to, get, for example, going to Wawa or going to get food or anything, I always am looking over my shoulder to make sure, that I, am safe. Do I have, exit points? Do I have ways to get out places? It shouldn't be that way, but that's how I feel about it. No matter where I'm at, I'm always checking to make sure I have some way out of a situation just in case.
Right.
So.
And that's always good to have regardless, because, in the current day and age with, mass shootings, it's always good to have a getaway as well. So you have, so
I try not to sit with my back to the door if at all possible.
that's a smart thing. Reese, for you now and you don't have to say exactly what area you are, but being where you are in New Mexico, do you feel safer just generally and overall?
Yeah,
That's good.
I do.
And that's the most important thing, right? But here's the other thing. He shouldn't have had to move to feel safer. Right? That's the key there, right? The fact that we go through this, and not just us, it is the topic we're talking about because everybody on the panel is either in the community or an ally to it. But POC communities go through it on a day in and day out basis as well. And I really, I'm looking forward to maybe possibly doing a panel about that in the future. We are over the hour mark, so I'm going to let us wrap here. This is only a part one. I'm sure we're going to do many more as things start to come, to fruition. We're trying to reschedule a Pepper Fox interview. I was supposed to do that today, but instead we pivoted and used the time to talk about actual issues going on in our community right now, which I thought was important too. I'm hoping to reschedule that Pepper Fox interview soon because I really want everybody to understand Pepper's perspective, but I also want people to understand from Pepper that her son was a human being. He was a beautiful young man who was brutally taken from her. And, she needs platforms. She needs to talk about this stuff because nobody's doing anything. Nobody's going anywhere with it. So we're really looking forward to that. The next show that I'm going to be hosting is going to be a panel on the cult aspect as it pertains to possibly Jason's murder. That's something I'm very looking forward to. And Andrea's boo is going to be on that episode. So
my bestie,
your bestie. And that's going to be another great aspect of, talking about this, but we can't stop talking about it. We cannot stop talking about it.
Can I drop a few more statistics?
Sure, go
real
for
quick, because I don't want to not address it.
Yeah.
According to the Human Rights Campaign, last year was the worst year for transgender and gender nonconforming people. 44 deaths that they tracked, murdered due to violent crime. 44, worst year on record.
How many of those were POC?
Quite a few of them.
If I'm not mistaken,
Yeah,
80%. 80% of the 44, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, 80%.
Sounds about right, yeah.
That's staggering.
And then
this year is looking to shape up as to be the worst. It's going to top that 44.
Yeah. In another article I found, some great journal articles, bias motivated crimes based on all of the things that are mentioned in the Matthew Shepard Act are at troubling higher levels. racially motivating being the worst.
Now we talk about the hate crimes, federal hate crimes law. Tennessee is one of the few states that have zero protections for the LGBTQIA community.
Correct.
That means Tennessee, you cannot invoke the Matthew Shepard Act.
Why do we live here?
Not by choice.
Facts.
It's
Well, mine was, but
it's staggering, and it needs to keep. We need to keep talking about it. After we do the episode about the cult aspect as it pertains to the Jason Fox thing, I want to dive into more trans issues, because it's another thing that not a lot of people talk about. We're so used to talking about lesbian and gay and bisexual, we don't talk enough about trans and non-binary, and that's across all spectrums of social media, of everything. So I'd really like to get into a breakdown and talk about those issues as well. I also want to point out, if you have social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever the case may be, on the 15th of September this month, Jason's mother is doing a funeral, like a memorial funeral for her son, because she didn't get a chance to have a say in how his funeral went. And she needs all of the love and support that she can get. So if you can spread that information, check her out on social medias. She's got a bunch. Pepper Fox 4. They keep trying to ban her. So keep spreading the word about Jason. The more people listen, even if your platform has 5 people on it, that's 5 people that get told. No platform is too small. No audience is too small. This story needs to be told, and we are going to help Pepper tell it and get it to the correct and appropriate people. I'm actually
working on a story on that front.
That's right. Shiva's working on a story. I'm working on some stuff. Andrea's working on. We're all busy bees. We're all busy bees here at Total Nerd Takeover. I want to thank the entire panel for being here. Mama Bear, I love you to death. Reese, my brother, I love you. Bougie, Devin, my best friend, my little brother. Andrea, you know how much I love you. And Shiva, thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you.
Tune in for the next one. We've got a whole bunch of stuff coming to Total Nerd Takeover, but this is the first one. Here it is, the launch of Total Nerd Takeover.
Yes, right? Let's go.
Let's go. Let's do this. Thank you all so very much for being here, and we will talk to you and see you next time.